Good morning. It is Monday, June 12th, a regular meeting of the Eugene Planning Commission. And at the beginning, we reserve 10 minutes for public comment. And at this point, are there any green sheets that have been turned in? No. Okay. Is there anybody from the public that would like to provide testimony on anything that's not scheduled for a public hearing or public hearing items for which the record is already closed? Oh, it looks like no. There'll be another opportunity maybe for you to offer some input. So agenda item number 2, are there items from the commission? Are there items from staff?
Oh, yeah. Wait.
Oh, wait.
Sorry. Go ahead. Stephen first, and then I'll go.
Okay. Did I totally miss you?
No,
Sorry, Stephen,
I
you
was
go.
just checking my sketch.
Okay, sorry, Commissioner Baker.
So I wanted to mention a couple of things. I attended the Sustainability Commission meeting on the 17th, and one of the items that was discussed was, I wanted to pass on, is they're having a meeting tomorrow of a smaller group that's looking at tiny houses, because I know it's tomorrow at 3 o'clock in room 210 here. They also discussed an issue that they had previously discussed the meeting before, which was on, trying to look at the right word here, but it has to do with the current bank that the city uses, U.S. Bank, supported the pipeline in Dakota, and there's concern from the Human Rights Commission and also from the Sustainability Commission that maybe the city council needs to review that contract, which is coming due in late this fall, to renew, and maybe find a local bank for their banking needs. Also, I wanted to mention I attended the Historic Review Board meeting, and again, this may be of interest to some people. The Historic Review Program at the city has a small grant program up to $10,000. It's $10,000 per year. We make small grants to repair historic buildings. These are grants, not loans, so typically they're $1,000, but that meeting we sort of changed the rules a little bit and allowed the money to be greater than that. So this would be any building that's already designated as a city landmark, or it's on the National Register. You would be eligible for a grant. There's a loan program, but the interest rates are not much better than the commercial rates, so there hasn't been extensive use of that. So that's it from my point of view.
Thank you. Commissioner Borowski.
Yeah, I sit on the Community Development Block Grant Advisory Committee. They've met, and they'll be having their final meeting of this year to make a recommendation for this year's CDBG money. It'll be at 3 o'clock on Friday the 23rd here in this building.
Thank you. Any other items from the Planning Commission? No. Okay. Staff, are there any items?
Yeah, a couple items. First one is there's going to be a City Council work session tonight for adoption of the urban growth boundary recommendation, which you all have worked so hard on. Just a work session, no decision tonight, and that's at the 5:30 work session. Tomorrow, the Lane County Board of Commissioners will have their own work session. Again, no decision, just conversation. That'll happen at 1:30 in Harris Hall tomorrow. Following that, on June 27th, there will be a public hearing in the evening, I think. Wait to see when that is scheduled. I think it may be 6 o'clock. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Hearing's at 6:30.
Hearing begins at 6:30 in Harris Hall on June 27th, and that'll be a joint public hearing with the Lane County Board of Commissioners and the Eugene City Council. Following that, tentatively, the council is considering July 17th potentially for a decision date. Again, that's pending confirmation and the Board of County Commissioners, pending confirmation, may be considering it as early as August 8th. And again, the Eugene City Council and the Board of Commissioners will consider those at separate meetings, separate deliberations. So that's just a little bit of kind of logistical updates for Envision Eugene. Tonight, your chair and co-chair will be there to provide some brief comments to the City Council and help reinforce those connections between the hard work that you all do and the recommendation that you provided and Council's upcoming decision. So finally, last thing on the agenda, Commissioner Mills, this is your last meeting.
Oh.
And I can't believe it because it's been 8 years.
Yes, 8 years, 2000.
Yeah. Yes, 2000. I can't believe it. It's been a long time. And I know you said that we should not do anything for you, but we can't let you go without a little something.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, well, you can have something, or you can have.
That's a pretty tall something.
Oh, absolutely, we'll share, yes.
So we just have a little dessert for you. On behalf of staff, I just have to say it's been an honor and a pleasure to work with you. And I just feel like you have been an incredible, thoughtful member of the Planning Commission. You've always been very, very respectful to your colleagues and to staff. You've listened to the community and the public and always given your best to make the decision that you feel is right. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I'll just take a minute here and thank you, Robin, and I wanted to thank all of the planning staff and legal staff for all of their, I've got 4 words down here: hard work, dedication, tact, all in extremely healthy doses. And I'd also have to throw in another one: there's courage in there. I've seen several times where I've seen outright courage, and it just underlines the dedication of the staff. I also want to thank all the Planning Commission members who I feel show similar dedication and tact and hard work, and both present members and members that I learned how to be a planning commissioner from that were on in the past, and I owe them a lot. And finally to City Council for letting me serve here. It's been a great honor. I've learned a lot, and I just really appreciate the opportunity to come and work with you all. Thank you.
So does Planning Commission have any words? Oh, Jeff, or Commissioner Mills? Maybe I can call you Jeff now. Commissioner Mills, let's call you Commissioner Mills. It has really been a pleasure. Thank you. And your honesty and integrity and being clear and concise about well-researched about your positions has been really helpful. So I really appreciate it. Any other commissioners? Commissioner Nicolello.
I think that it would just be efficient to give him a round of applause because that's what you deserve.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great job. I think that says it better than I could. So
8 years is a big commitment. Yeah. So thank you.
I think that does it. You may notice that your agenda is actually pretty light for the next month and a half or so. It's been a real grind over the last few months. I know that, and so you're going to get a little break coming up. So that's it.
Okay. Public, here's your opportunity to say something else. If you would like to take advantage of the opportunity, it's just touch in with the public. How are we doing? If you have any comments, questions. Okay. No. A lot of
I
smiles.
guess I would say
Okay.
thanks for all the comments, reviews that you've done for the Oakley Meadows project. I'm sure that's been a lot of hard work.
Commissioner Borowski.
To that point, I noticed on the city council or tentative work schedule, on Wednesday, the 21st of June, one of their topics is new housing developments where unimproved roads are the main access. So that looks like that's a noon work session. I don't know where that may have come from, but
Yeah, I think Public Works is leading that discussion.
yeah.
Okay. So we have agenda item number 3, River Road Santa Clara Public Involvement Plan and Project Charter. And we have staff member Zach Galloway here.
All right. Thanks, Commission. This is a follow-up to the update that I provided in April. At that time, Kate Purley from the Santa Clara Community Organization joined me, and we provided a longer update into what's transpired with both community organizations, Santa Clara and River Road, taking the lead over several years worth of public engagement and outreach with their neighbors, and really demonstrating a high degree of neighborhood readiness for this neighborhood planning effort, and then just the amount of capacity that they've built over the years. Since that time, we've been quite busy. As you see in your packet, there's a project charter and a public involvement plan, which we're reviewing today and seeking input on. Those are both in a draft state, and we expect that they'll tweak and change in the coming months before returning to you in July for a formal approval of the approach, the proposal. Let's see. So, well, I'm going to start with an explanation of the project charter, and then I'll turn my attention to the public involvement plan. And I thought it would be helpful to just walk through both documents, and then I can pause at the end if you'd like, or the end of the project charter for Q&A, if that would be helpful, just to keep it fresh and current. Okay. So the the charter is really there to set expectations for the project and to explain both the general goals of the project, so that anybody who comes in, a stakeholder or any involved member, can kind of pick up this document and see what the intended outcome is, as well as kind of where we're headed, what the roles and responsibilities are for any entity. It also covers scope, schedule, budget, list of deliverables are there. So again, people know what to expect up front, early in the process. The timeline for this particular project is looking at about an 18-month to 2-year time period. And it also includes the geographic area that we'll be covering, and I've just provided a few short slides for reference for anybody in attendance who doesn't have the agenda packet, or for those seeing this at home. So we have a unique wrinkle in this project, which I mentioned back in April, but I'll call our attention to again, that we're looking at both the Santa Clara neighborhood, which is north of Beltline, and the River Road community organization south of Beltline. But River Road, Santa Clara, actually, if this cursor will come on, there we go, actually extends beyond our urban growth boundary. So the Eugene urban growth boundary is this blue dashed line, but you see the lighter gray here in the northwest, and then to the east along the main channel of the Willamette is also within the Santa Clara community organization boundary, and we'll be working with residents there to make sure that this is a comprehensive look at both community organizations. And to that end, I do just want to recognize our county partners, Lydia McKinney and Amber Bell, who are attending today. They'll be involved in both the political side of this as we get to adoption and going to the Board of County Commissioners, but also Amber will be one of our project management team members that you see listed there in the charter today. And then lastly, I'll note that this charter does reference in a few places the Federal Transit Administration's transit-oriented development pilot grant that we were successful in securing with LTD. LTD is still working with the FTA, the Federal Transit Administration, on the necessary contracts and paperwork. So we don't have all the clarity that we would like at this point, but that will be rolled into this charter to make a more comprehensive and complete picture of the whole project. I think I said in April, our intent is that these look and feel like one project, even in reality it's a local neighborhood plan and then a separate funded look at the corridor. which here is shown in the hatching and the transit corridor called out in the orange arrow. The charter goes on to provide a decision-making structure and process, and that's the one other slide that I have just for us to refer to, which attempts to take all of those different committees and the general public, and then on the left side of this graphic, provide some clarity on the adoption process, how we carry that through both planning commissions, the board, and the city council, and eventually finalize an adopted plan. Probably of a more unique structure than what you all are familiar with the adoption process is the right side of this graphic, which is just broadly referred to here as the planning process. In working with the script members, several of which are in attendance and joining us today, there was a lot of the Santa Clara and River Road implementation planning team members were also involved in Envision Eugene. They took part in the community resource group, and this largely reflects, I think, their interest and support for that structure of having, in this case, what we're calling topic teams or focus groups that would act almost like this community resource group to do more of the detailed work or provide direction to the technical advisory committee that you see up there in the green box, which is city staff, county staff from various departments working on the technical ins and outs of the plan, and then collaborating with members of the public on these focus groups to work through policy, language, analysis, and ultimately arrive at an action plan that would include programmatic approaches, zone changes, code amendments, perhaps capital improvements, and therefore there would be budget implications. So again, a very collaborative process between public and city and county staff. The other thing to call your attention to is the Community Advisory Committee, which in describing this and working recently, it came to the realization that this is the easiest way to explain this is that this acts as the planning commission for the two neighborhoods, that they review the proposals, provide their feedback, and ultimately would be kind of the decision-making group for the community organization that would then carry that proposal to this body on the formal side of the adoption process. The charter goes on to explain the coordination protocols as you get further after this decision-making process, and lays out an executive team, a policy team, our project management team, the technical advisory committee members, and then lays out options for how we would change this charter if it was necessary, if new deliverables were necessary, or if the timeline changed tremendously. And it concludes with explanation of constraints, interdependencies of different projects. In this case, the FTA TOD grant is the one, the obvious example where we've got an interdependent project. And then risks. And this is, I think those concluding sections are our attempt to forecast any obstacles or concerns that may arise in the course of the project, and where we are able to foresee that, provide some sort of mitigating action that would help us smooth the way or just tackle the issue head on, frankly. The large one in the case of River Road and Santa Clara being annexation, and you see that's probably the longest section of the charter that receives some discussion. I think I'll pause there, and before we dive into the public involvement plan, and if there are questions and answers and comments about the charter, we can talk through those.
Okay, are there any questions, comments, feedback? So Commissioner Jaworski, and then Commissioner Baker, and then Borowski.
I have several. I'll just ask a few to give other people. And I understand this is well done. And I understand it's supposed to be a template for future, when other neighborhoods or whatever come into the queue for. This is going to be either a refinement plan or, because you never say that. So is it a refinement plan?
Yes, it would be adopted as a refinement to our local comprehensive plan. That's correct.
Okay, I have two questions. On page 8, there are two things. One, under 2 policy chapters. When you say including special districts, are you looking there at the park district, or are you forming other districts? I'm not sure what's meant by that.
I can just say generally, we are committed to working with all of the special districts in that area. And there's also, let's see, if we jump to page 8 of the charter under the Community Advisory Committee structure, you can see that there's not just the Parks District, but also 2 water boards, River Road and Santa Clara,
Yeah,
as well as the fire districts, Santa Clara and Lane Rural. So,
Well, since you jumped there, why didn't you include, you only mentioned, I think on page 30, you're going to go out to El Camino at somewhere else, school, but you never included schools' involvement in this. Is that something that isn't needed out there? I just was wondered why they weren't ex officio, since you brought that up.
as part of the
Yeah.
decision-making
Is that
structure?
because the policy group didn't include them, or? Just a question. I
Yeah.
was going to ask it later, but you jumped.
They're included within the public involvement plan.
Yeah, I know that.
As
but
a
that's-
key stakeholder that we would reach out to. Yeah, it's worth exploring.
Okay, and on the same page 8, where it says capital budgets, I've looked at a lot of refinement plans. Is this new? I've never seen capital budgets in refinement plans. They're usually policy and some implementation actions. They don't have capital budgets. So this is going to be a new thing that we'll have in either updates or other refinement plans?
We felt it was only appropriate to acknowledge the budget implications for any policy
I think that's
decisions
great.
that we're
I'm just
making.
saying that, okay, so that's coming. Another question I'll let others in. On page 10 then, of this, when you look at specific policy chapters and also implementation strategies, some of the things stay in there that the implementation strategies will, provide direction to staff and other kinds of things. I know that when our refinement plan was there, we were told the city council only adopted policies and wouldn't adopt implementation actions, and it didn't direct staff to do anything. Is this something new also?
Can you just be more specific about what you were talking about? And
When we've been talking refinement plans for a long time, and when I
Yeah.
was talking with refinement plans, I was told that when the council adopted the refinement plans, they only adopted the policy sections and not the implementation actions, okay? But in here, it's saying you're going to have implementation strategies and actions which will direct staff and other city people to do things. Okay, well, what I'm saying, is that something new then?
I don't think that's new. I think, council always has the ability to direct staff to do things. I
Council
think-
does, yes,
Yeah.
but I'm saying that the plan is saying the plan will.
Uh-huh.
And that's what I'm asking, that's why I'm asking that question. I think it's great,
Yeah.
but I just wanted to clarify that to make sure when I talk to other people that this is the way refinement plans will be heading.
So if you look at refinement plans in the past, and you kind of go way back, and then you look at sort of the newer iterations of refinement plans, some of the older refinement plans are kind of a mix of what appear to be policies and then some other things that appear to be more directive, right? So I think the direction we're moving is to try to have the refinement plan policies be more policy specific, and to have things that are directive be in some kind of an implementation plan. Now, council can also adopt a plan of any kind that directs all kinds of different work. But the actual adopted policies, for example, policies that are used, let's say, in a land use application, let's say a site review application, right? The idea is to be clear about what policies you actually want to look at when you're considering those kinds of applications.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
I understand. I just want to make
Okay.
clear that I'm reading that correctly. I think it's great. I
Okay.
just want to make sure when I talk to other people concerning refinement plans that this is the direction that they're going.
Yeah.
Can I ask a clarifying question really quickly? This doesn't seem to be different than it has been in the past. So in the past, want to make sure there isn't misunderstandings. In the past, there's been policies, and then under policies and refinement plans, there are actions. Those actions are suggested actions to implement that policy. So is this any different than that past? That's really,
I think the only difference is that those implementation strategies in the past were intentionally not adopted.
I see.
And I can only guess what the intent was behind that. And I'm in conversations with Robin, we've been committed to making sure that the plan has a very clear implementation goal and that we don't just leave it at a policy level. So
Okay.
if that is
Yep.
different, then.
So there'll be the action implementation portion will be actually adopted as steps to follow through with,
That is
consistent with the
how it's
policy.
crafted today.
Okay,
Yeah, that's great.
Yep.
That's what I understood. That's what I was
Yeah.
asking. Good.
great. Okay. So we have many people in the queue. We have Baker, Borowski, Randall, and Nicolello. Commissioner Baker.
Yeah. Back on page 8, also under action plan, talks about neighborhood plans are living documents that must be implemented through subsequent actions by technical experts and community members. I think you might also need to think about including city agencies, because in the case of public, capital improvements or even zoning, proposed zoning changes, you're going to have city agency staff involved in these plan actions that come out afterward. And the same thing under the next one where it talks about zone changes and code amendments. Again, might want to add something about impossible capital improvements, because again, you've talked about that, just to make it clear to the reader. I have a number of other small comments. On page 12, and actually this is a question too. One thing that's, one of their, I guess we shouldn't call them pillars, but one of the 4 or 5 key issues that you talk about are parks and and open space, as I recall. And under the CAC, I see the Parks and River Road staff, but I assume that there's some areas where Eugene Parks, this is a question too. What, if we saw the map there, what is the split, or how is this, there's a River Road Parks and Recreation District. The city of Eugene Parks, is that only in the north, or is it, in other words, where are the just jurisdiction boundaries, or
Sure.
is this to be somehow combined, But it seemed to me that you should probably add Eugene Parks, because it's such an interesting, it's an important issue, and you already have one of the parks groups in this CAC, and it would be good to have depending on the liaison or whatever else needs to go on between those groups.
So we've got the, if you jump ahead to, let's see, page 17.
Yeah, with a long list, yeah.
You see under the technical advisory committee, you've got the city's park staff represented there.
Right, but it seemed like it may need to be valuable to have it at this level as well, where you have these other, particularly River Road Parks and Recreation folks operating.
That's to address the reason those people are proposed there as ex officio members is more on kind of the governance and representation level, and not so much the technical ins and outs of the daily workings. And
But it
that's
seems
why
like
there's
there's
a division there.
complication, there's, a sort of a complication because of the multiple parks districts. They need to, be they need to be communicating with each other all along the process to have the best result. So, whatever you can do to facilitate that. I don't know if it happens here, but since this is where you specifically talk about the River Road Parks people, I thought it might be valuable to include them. Let me keep going, so dwell on. And again, if sometime you could clarify how the parks area splits in this jurisdiction, that might be helpful. On page 16, on this like 1, 2, I mean, there's 3 groups. One is just the planning staff. But on the upper 2, I think in terms of transparency, or it would be useful to either have a neighborhood representative, could be non-voting on those 2 upper ones, or at least make sure that all those meetings are open to the public and adequately noticed, so if the public wants to attend, that they would know what, they could attend these meetings. And, just in terms of increasing transparency. And then the same thing on and again, this is in general, now with new technology, it would be valuable if these meetings were, including like on page 17, the interagency team here. It would again be maybe useful to have a neighborhood representative, and it would be useful if the meetings were recorded or, minutes or something. In other words, so if someone wasn't able to attend, they could, watch what went on or read and the same thing with the triple bottom line sounding board. Their meetings are well advertised. Either you have a member of the neighborhood group is a representative, and or they can a non-voting member. Again, those are things that you can decide, but I think that would really be helpful in improving transparency. And I think I had a couple more, and that's it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Those are catches.
On page 19, the very top of the page, it says applicability beyond the corridor. And again, this is a challenge. So I'll just, thank you for doing this, but it'd be an interesting challenge to see how you're going to handle. Obviously the corridor was designed by the grant, but how you're actually going to be able to handle the transitions and so forth, that would be useful. And then finally, just a question on the bottom of page 19. This is just really to clarify it in my mind. Under a continued project prioritization, it talks about that this area represents 1/5 of Eugene, and I didn't know if that meant land area or population or both, but it might be useful to clarify it if it's one and not the other, just so that it's clear in people's minds.
It's population, but
Okay.
thanks for the question.
Yeah.
Thank you. Commissioner Borowski, and then Commissioner Randall.
Thank you. Good work on this, and I just have a couple of comments. One of them, I highlighted the 1/5 of the 1/5 of Eugene as well, and my concern is that if we're using this as a template for other neighborhood areas, I want to make sure that it is strong enough that the citywide goals are implemented into it. I mean, I've seen it in a couple of different areas, like on page 14 under the CAC, the 4th bullet down, it says, work with city staff and technical advisory team to reach mutually agreed upon community visions and plans that work with larger Envision Eugene community visions. That's also referenced a similar type of thing on the bottom of page 16. But I don't know if that's coming through strong enough, because I'm concerned that if we do neighborhood plans, and we do this neighborhood, and we do that neighborhood, and we do this neighborhood, and we do that neighborhood, each one of those is going to have a nice little plan, but will that fit the city's goals as a whole? And I'm thinking about housing. And I don't know how to get to it stronger. I mean, I talked to somebody and they said, look at the population need and look at the housing needs and say, okay, each neighborhood, you have to accommodate for this many new housing units. Do it however you want, but know that your neighborhood needs to accommodate this many or not. And I'm concerned that if you look at the Community Advisory Committee, we have people from River Road, Santa Clara, obviously, important people to be on there, Santa Clara Community Organization, and somebody from outside the UGB. But do we have a voice in that body as a whole that's looking at the city as a whole? And where does that voice come in? And is that voice going to be strong enough that we don't, and I'm not specifically talking about River Road, Santa Clara. I'm looking at this as if this is a template, and then the next neighborhood organization that takes this template and says, okay, we're going to do our neighborhood plan, and then another one does it, and we're going to do our neighborhood plan, and pretty soon everything's planned up, but they're all restricted. And I'm concerned about that. And I don't know how to get it in, but I think it's very important that these bodies know that the Santa Clara River Road is a part of the city and has to have those Envision Eugene goals built in from the beginning. And I don't know whether that means different representation on some of these boards and advisory committees or what. I just don't know how to get there. But I just wanted to bring that up. That was one of my concerns, because it's very easy. I know in our neighborhood, we look at our specific issues. Certainly. And I'm not thinking about, well, gosh, I've got to put another 34,000 people in this town, And especially with an area that is as big as this and encompasses a fifth of the population of the city of Eugene, I think it's very important. So those are just some of my comments.
That's a great one to point out, and I'll just speak to that briefly, that as far as implementing Envision Eugene, that's something that we've talked about with the script members a lot, that this is the opportunity to tailor the neighborhood, or to create a neighborhood plan, but also to tailor that bigger, broader vision of Envision Eugene to the specific characteristics of the neighborhood. So when we say key transit corridor, it's not going to look like Franklin Boulevard next to the university or with a new arena in the midst of River Road. It's the opportunity to make sure that it fits, that key transit corridor fits in the neighborhood. So part of that's on staff, right. Certainly. And then the other side of that is the triple bottom line sounding board that's proposed there, where we're bringing in members of this commission, the active transportation committee from Public Works, human rights, sustainability, and with regular check-ins throughout this 2-year process, inviting that citywide, more global look at what we're doing. So hopefully there's enough kind of checks and balances built in there.
And
I appreciate you raising that point.
And I guess, I'm real confident with the organizations that are working out there, because I think that they're on board and they're really know what they're doing and know the direction they're going and know the direction that Eugene's going. But what I'm concerned about is this is now it's put on as a template, and it gets transferred to other neighborhoods who may not have as much of an understanding of that. And if it's not very, put in here pretty strongly, they may just have, I want to protect my little neighborhood.
Yeah, I really appreciate that perspective as well. And I guess I would say, as the Council's Committee on Public Engagement, you are in a really good position to say what you think about that. If you have a recommendation that you think we ought to move forward with, or if you have suggestions or ideas, anyone from the Commission, for how to address that concern, we're here today to hear.
If I might just say, in addition, as Commissioner Brodsky mentioned, Envision Eugene, I'm sure that the city or one of these technical groups will be looking for in conformity so there's no conflicts with the comprehensive plan, which in this 2-year period, which will be more specific and address some of the issues that aren't in the urban growth boundary package. So that's in there too, and that's being done, I assume. I assume it would be done so there aren't conflicts, and that's coordinated. Sure. Okay, yeah. Good. So it's both Envision Eugene goals and comprehensive plan policies.
Yeah, I think that's reflected early on, Zach, if I'm not mistaken, in the goals of the plan.
They are.
I'd also like to point out just briefly, as far as this being a template, there's nothing set in stone here in terms of a template. Every part of the community is going to have a slightly different setup and organization. And I think as a community, we just have to be real thoughtful about that moving forward. There's no one size fits all. Even looking in the past, there have been a variety of compositions for committees that are working on this stuff. I think what Zach and the partners in River Road Santa Clara have put together is a way to help get all the important voices at the table in different ways. There's a variety of different community or groups that are involved that are going to be checks and balances, not the least of which, of course, is you all as the Planning Commission and as an at-large commission. It's really partly your responsibility to make sure that we're headed in the right direction in terms of the city's broader policies as well. So again, we're totally open to any suggested modifications you have on that. If you want to think on it and get back to us, we're open to that too.
Okay.
That's all right.
I have Commissioner Randall, Nicolello Mills, myself, and then Commissioner Baker and Jaworski.
Thank you. And again, Zach, good work with all of those involved with getting this to this point. I think it's a good beginning on all of this. Just related to the templates, I guess I see a template as an outline. And so if you think of it in that way, if we've got our pillars for Envision Eugene and then we have a template that we work with on dialing that down a little farther, that can then have the specificity for each neighborhood and their unique aspects. So I think having that overarching template is good because then it's consistent throughout, but then it can be custom tailored to each neighborhood. And I think that's important, and I think that's good. I had two questions. And first one is, when you talk about the FTA deliverables, you mentioned triple transit analysis in that. What is that? I hadn't heard that term before. Triple bottom line,
Sure.
obviously, but
So in the course of the FTA grant proposal that we put forward, we proposed a design charrette that would take a full week,
okay.
that would develop not just a single master plan for the whole corridor, but 2 or 3 options of various scales, densities, et cetera. And that we would use what we term the triple transit analysis to review the economic feasibility of each in that context, which, what's buildable, what can the local market support, are financial incentives necessary to make this particular vision work, but not this one. So asking those questions. Okay. The second leg was transit. So at what density do you get what frequency of transit? So do you need 15 dwelling units per acre to get to 5-minute headways? Is there some correlation there? And then the third is a livability component, or those are the 3 legs of that stool that we were proposing, which we called it livability, but it's largely about compatibility with the existing development patterns in the River Road neighborhood, and ensuring that we have proper transitional standards in place and that it steps down from this key transit corridor into the single-family neighborhoods that are there today.
It's actually a great segue to my second question, which was about the draft zoning code amendments and those transitions from the transit corridor into the single-family neighborhoods. And I guess I would just encourage everyone with those transitions. We've been talking a lot in our community lately about the missing middle housing, and really looking at that concept perhaps as a really good way to make that transition from the denser development along the transit corridors into the single-family neighborhoods. So
Certainly.
I just want to put that out there again, because I think it's I don't want it to just be a buzzword for us. I think the whole missing middle idea is very valuable and very needed. And I think it'd be a great way to start making some of those transitions from the denser transit corridors into the single-family neighborhoods.
That is part of the reason that we proposed this wider swath around the corridor, and we weren't solely focused on the parcels that have frontage, but that we recognize that there's a transition that happens behind that front parcel. So,
Thank you.
thanks.
Commissioner Nicolalo.
So I'm sure all of us are, but I'm really, really excited to see this move forward. And the neighborhood has put in an immense amount of work into this, and it shows. I love the idea of a charter. That is such an awesome idea. So just a few kind of questions about mechanics. Zach, how will application of interested individuals to the CAC and to the topic teams work? What does that process look like for people who are interested in getting involved?
The Community Advisory Committee will be nominated by the two community organization boards, River Road and Santa Clara. And then the topic teams, we anticipate, or focus groups, we anticipate one or two members of the Community Advisory Committee participating on each of those. So there is kind of a direct connection between the two. Staff will probably bring, depending on the topic, members of that technical advisory committee to be to serve the topic teams. And then honestly, I don't have a good answer for how people will volunteer themselves to get involved with those topic teams. But that's something that we'll be putting out the call on through our audience building phases this summer. We're looking at a large kickoff event in October, most likely at North Eugene High School. So that's another opportunity for people to tell us we want to be involved in economic development or parks and natural resources, and to step forward and volunteer. And also we'll be asking that question of, well, at various points when you look at the public involvement plan, it's not just about those face-to-face workshop opportunities, but different online interfaces and tabling events throughout the summer. We'll be asking those questions of how, when, and where people want to get involved. And do they have the capacity to attend some meetings throughout the next 2 years or not?
Yeah, I think kind of what I wanted to hear a little bit more about was what that recruitment looks like. As you know, recruitment's kind of one of the things that I'm particularly passionate about. So I think that would be really interesting to kind of learn more about what that recruitment process looks like. And especially for the Citizen Advisory Committee and for the topic areas, I realize it's very, very difficult to try and recruit certain demographics, but it would be wonderful if there was a commitment to strive for that diversity and perhaps even have a little bit more weight given to folks who would bring forward those areas that we don't really tend to hear from in the process all the time. And the folks I'm thinking of are renters, those who live in multifamily housing, people who own businesses in the neighborhood, people who bike and bus, those with school-aged children who are raising families in River Road, people who I think would provide a lot of really wonderful perspectives to a Citizen Advisory Committee or to the topic areas, but sometimes don't always have the opportunity to come to the table or are a little bit too busy to know that the table's available for them. And so just thinking about what that recruitment would look like would be fantastic. And I know there's a lot of great people on the project team who are probably already 50 miles ahead of me on bringing this up and thinking about it, but just as a note. And I think what even might be helpful too is if it's just one of the things I was thinking about that the Willett-Kenzie plan did that in the early 90s that I think was really successful was they actually sent a letter from the mayor to the residents of the neighborhood to let them know that the process was getting kicked off. And I think that, I mean, I'm 24 and I still read letters when I get them, so I feel like we've got a good diversity of people here who would read a letter if it got sent to them. And I know it's expensive to send mail, but I think what would be really cool is if this charter was sent out to the neighborhood, and then also to potentially a letter inviting people to apply through the neighborhood association nomination process. That could be really, really interesting, and I think a good way to reach out to a lot of those people. And it's definitely requires multiple contacts, but it would make, I think, a good first one. And so that just something to think about. I think my final question the recruitment stuff all aside, and I might just follow up with some neighborhood folks later and kind of see what their thoughts are on that. But you had a piece on, what was it, page 10. So the final deliverable, you brought up that it's going to be a really high-quality document, considering the Envision Eugene document and community design handbook set a high bar for publication quality. And the only comment I have on that is fantastic, but something we should be thinking about too is what's readable to us now, but what's also going to be readable 20 years from now. And in somebody who in their professional work has to work with a lot of adopted plans, some of them can be rather difficult to read. Some of them were created before I was a twinkle in anyone's eye. And so just thinking about what that looks like in 20 years to ensure that when somebody's coming in, they're able to use it quite easily. And that might be having a physical adopted map and then also having like adopted shape files or things like that as well. But thinking about that kind of as a strategy so we can have a truly livable, evolving document. Thanks, Zach.
Good ideas.
Commissioner Mills.
Yeah, I wanted to thank everybody that was involved in this. It's excellent work. It's a great start. With that, I'll say the risks are high here of failure. This is a big job. It's a very complex job. It's quite a mixed area, and I think those are all bring inherent challenges to this. It's going to take a great effort. I believe you'll be successful, but you just need to recognize that I think that there's a risk there of losing focus, perhaps, but I'm very optimistic. That's my first point. My only other point is I wanted to speak briefly in support of what Vice Chair Borowski said regarding Envision Eugene and trying to weave it a little more forcefully into the documents. And I think that, taking into account what Commissioner Nicolello said about being able to read it 20 years hence, we all know what Envision Eugene is now. In the future, it may not ring a bell 20 years from now, but the pillars themselves, I think, are fairly clear on what we want. And so I would encourage this plan to cite, if not the pillars, at least Envision Eugene. For example, on page 8, item 2, policy chapters, perhaps, is a good location. And then under major plan deliverables, under topic-specific policy chapters, I think an item there that highlights Envision Eugene and pillars would be useful. I guess that's all. Excellent work, very hopeful.
I have myself in the queue next. I also would like to thank everyone involved. This is exciting. I wanted to actually reiterate what Commissioner Mills and Borowski have said, and actually Commissioner Randall also in kind of this idea of template. I do think there's a higher level template that actually kind of is there, and that's like the pillars, for instance, and establishing a way of us looking primarily as a community, a larger community, and then within that larger community there are unique aspects of each neighborhood, but to make sure that we validate that we are part of a larger community. So I actually would agree and stress what Commissioner Borowski brought up initially, and then it's been reiterated by other planning commissioners. I think some of, there have already been some examples. The other thing that might be helpful if, like you said, Robin, if the planning commissioner provides that role in terms of review of that at-large perspective at very critical moments, to provide review in a preliminary phase, so we make sure that it truly is a collaborative document if that's a role that you see us playing. The other thing I wanted to bring up is the collaborative process. So my neighborhood has done some fairly extensive, very large refinement plan amendments. And one of the things we discovered in the first one, for instance, and then kind of altered the process. And I just want to make sure, reiterate this. I brought it up at the last meeting that we had. And that is to not silo communities from staff, et cetera. It kind of goes to what Commissioner Baker's talking about in terms of having the CAC meetings and maybe if Parks Planning was there present, or there's some kind of force liaison or meeting minutes. Because what happens if you silo is that the CAC is having a discussion, and then there's staff potentially, that there's parameters, public work parameters, park parameters. CAC is moving quickly or moving in a direction counter to that. I just would encourage everybody to look at the situation as a collaborative stakeholder process. So to make sure that there's a lot of communication back and forth, that's at the city level, and making sure the community knows what's being discussed there and vice versa. It goes to the transparency piece.
Certainly.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So now we're going second round. Commissioner Baker and then Jaworski.
Yeah, and I wanted to thank also everyone that was involved, and as part of that, I'll provide a brief anecdote. When I was a graduate student at the University of Oregon in planning in the early 70s, we always did projects for a couple of terms, and one of the projects we did was on River Road. There's a few of us that are my age, but those that are will remember River Road was, we did it in the winter and the spring, and there was a reason the instructor chose those periods of time, and that was because River Road was, I don't know how, it was gorgeous, it was beautiful, it was lined with cherry orchards the whole way out, and it was just lined with blooms in the spring. In fact, it was really the only way to drive into town that was pleasant in Eugene. You came either from the north or the south, and you came through by wigwam burners that were still active, unfortunately, at the time. So it was delightful. So I really hope that this plan takes that image and is able to really take advantage of the Eugene pillars and in the process of changing over time, but also repair and enhance the neighborhood livability under that pillar. There's three other things that I wanted to mention. One thing for me that I think this would be really great because is to really look at parks, particularly at neighborhood parks, because the city, let's just say they've been weak about providing neighborhood parks every 4 to 6 blocks from a residential development, where there's some equipment for young children and to play and parks and open space. A number of jurisdictions have done this in the past very well. Portland was very good at this. And we have an opportunity here, which you don't have in some areas, like in the developed parts of the city, where you could still develop neighborhood parks sprinkled around the neighborhood, because it's still probably possible to purchase property at prices that are not make it very extremely difficult. So I would really suggest that somehow you think about that in the planning for it. And the other thing is, what I mentioned is, we've talked about it for years. I don't know how many, 8 years, 10 years, transitions, when we've never gotten around to deal with them. The transitions between lower density and higher density, and even between commercial and residential. So it would be great if this provides the opportunity to look at those transitions. Some of that can be translated to other areas that really aren't, involved in this neighborhood plan, but some of those transitions could be used in other areas. And finally, I wanted to mention, and I don't know how this gets included, but Portland has a lot of experience with corridors and making changes on corridors. And I can't remember the fellow's name, but I could dig it up. But there's a retired person who worked on this for years, who's considered, a national expert. And he might very well volunteer some time and come down and meet with the neighborhood groups and the city staff and, provide whatever, experience he has from successes and failures. And that might be valuable. Anyway, I'll stop there. Thanks.
Yeah, I welcome the contacts if you've got those.
I'll dig his name up. Yep.
So before we go to Commissioner Jaworski, I just want to have a time check because you have another whole section.
We did want to cover the public involvement.
Yeah,
so.
and we're almost at 12:35. I mean, we're really tight. So I wanted to check in with the next agenda item, Planning Commission operations, because you had mentioned we have kind of a not a full schedule today. So kind of can you give me an estimate of how much more additional time we can give? Like, let's adjust the agenda so I can have a better target.
I think the next item we can take care of in half an hour.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Commissioner Jaworski.
Yeah, on, on page 18, the project budget, there's 100,000, and below it, it indicates that none of this allocation will be used by staff, so I assume it's used for consultings and things like that.
Yes, or for, so it's for services and materials, so the idea of mailing out to everybody in the neighborhood.
Oh,
those
okay,
sorts of
those
things
types
would
of things, but
come out of
not
this
for
budget as
staff
well.
time. It indicates in the third bullet that the PMT has the potential to request additional funds in FY18. And when I look on the prior page on 16, that's a 3-member committee, and the write-up for it is that the core team will make crucial decisions in a timely manner. All very good, a lot of power resting there, but what I don't understand is in relationship to that is how these committees relate. Do they make that decision? Do they make a recommendation to the CAC, or do they make a recommendation to the executive? I don't understand the relationships between the committees so that they're not operating all alone. That's all I want. I just can't understand it. Can you explain that to me? Like,
Well, one, I guess we can make that more clear, but specific to this issue around the budget, the PMT would make that request to the executive team. So I'm not going to make that request directly to City Council. That has to run through Robin and then eventually through
Okay,
that
so they would-
executive team. I can imagine with some sort of update to, where we are in the current process, what the funds have been used for, what they will continue to be used for through the life of the project. So that's kind of a standard budget request process that goes on internally.
and any relationships on the other committees? Like, when the CAC is doing things and it makes, because it says the executive committee will high-level policy direction. So if they're going in a certain direction on a CAC, it has to come to them because they'll act on it, or do they just move on their own? That's what I'm unclear.
The executive committee is there in case there are issues that the PMT is unable to reconcile and requires kind of a higher level decision making at that executive level of department heads. If we are, I can't think of a good example, but just whenever projects go sideways and you need to raise the issue up to that decision maker, that higher level, that's what the executive committee is really there for.
Okay. It's usually
So
that
we
when you
need
do a
to-
charter, and it's pretty clear that, like you have charts for other flows, how that
Sure.
would be. On page 19, it indicated that the county, delegated all authority to the city for planning, zoning, and permitting, et cetera. And then on page 20, it states that it will still be in effect that they'll need to annex if they do a land division or development application, which is what
That's
they
correct.
do now. What if they, since you have this other authority, what if they just want a zoning change?
I don't know that I've ever dealt with a zone change. I don't know how that would work.
Do they need to annex, or do they just request one? I just want to see what they delegated you. You only mentioned 2 of the things.
Yeah, we can follow up on more details.
Sure.
Okay, just for clarity. I think this is a superb document. I look forward to seeing it in action.
Okay. Any other questions or comments in this area? Because now we're going to move to the second area, and we want to allow enough time to cover it. Zach, when you're done writing your notes, we are ready.
All right. All right. Thanks for pointing those out. We'll try and clarify the roles and how they, all those committees work together. So turning our attention to the public involvement plan, again, I have to kind of sing the praises of the past efforts of Scroll and Script and all the work that's gone into reaching out to their community and listening to their neighbors and really identifying those 6 key areas that now the neighborhood plan will take forward and carry on. There was also really, from those observations, from that work, I think it's fair to say that the neighbors that were doing that work were very self-aware and just acknowledged that that certain demographics, I think as somebody mentioned earlier, were missed, that we didn't get a lot of volunteers in the business community to come to listening sessions, and without a targeted outreach at River Road Elementary School, we would have missed out on Latino families. And so we wanted to take the time to do this public involvement plan to actually ask those questions. We have a lot of assumptions, but we wanted to ask those questions. Why did you not get involved before? How can we make sure you're involved going forward? And Julie Fisher is here from Cogito, and we worked with Cogito over the last 2 months to come up with a proposal that's there in front of you. And we began with 3 kind of large group facilitated discussions with the Script members, as well as 2 general membership meetings with River Road and Santa Clara's community organization meetings. And then we had more than 10 small interviews and small meetings with large business owners, small business owners. So for every, Clink Cycles to Fred Meyer, just in size and scale, you can see the difference. Members, community organizations that are representative of the Latino and Latina communities, school administrators, affordable housing providers, to get a better understanding of how and where we can reach out to all those different demographics that weren't just volunteering to participate in the past. And from that, we have now a gigantic list of stakeholders that we need to reach back out to and start populating essentially with key contacts, how best to involve them, how do we get folks involved, how we get information out, how we bring it back in, how it informs the plan. And then, so I'll just walk through quickly a couple of the key parts of the plan. It begins with a discussion of goals, which reflect the principles for public participation that you all heard recently. It provides the same, or restates the same decision-making process that was in the charter. Obviously, that informs then the timing and the methods of public involvement. Includes that inventory of stakeholders, and this summer we'll be basically expanding that to include the different contact information, the relevant information, what networks they participate in, where we can reach them in existing structures, existing meetings, and then, just determining the best ways to be involved. Turns attention then to startup activities, which are, again, kind of summer activities. They're preparatory things that we need to have in place, a project web page, templates for newsletters, the actual structure of an e-newsletter, just a lot of kind of the administrative actions and then we move into the last 3 sections, which are reaching out, the action plan, and then making it happen. So reaching out is really building the awareness, bringing people to the table early on, helping the neighbors and the city craft this vision of where we're headed. Then we move into an action plan, which is more about the analysis. Now, once we've crafted that vision, policy writing, plan writing, and all the different action items that go into that. So it's not just code writing or zone changes, but we're intentionally taking a broader look and thinking of things the community can do for themselves, as well as what the city should be bringing to the table, or the county. So it's not just zoning and code amendments. It could also be programmatic things out of our community development office or community-led efforts, many of which are already going on that we could articulate here. And then lastly, the making it happen section is the actual code writing and zone changes. So if you think of the first 2 items that we want to do concurrently with the adoption of the neighborhood plan, they are the the part that we as planning can champion and carry forward. And then the other items in that action plan may come at a later phase as we bring more resources to the table throughout the life of the plan. At each of those three, you can imagine reaching out, the big broad umbrella approach of just bringing people to the table is a very different public involvement strategy than working through the nuts and bolts of land use code at the very end of the process. So the public involvement plan reflects that, I think, and just recognizes that different methods and different populations are going to be interested in the bigger vision, the more technical policy writing, the more very, very technical and detail-oriented code writing. So we're trying to reflect that in the PI plan. Our next steps with this now are to take kind of these high-level general actions, scope them out, how much staff time is needed for each one, is there an associated budget amount, what is that? So that's what we'll be doing over the next few weeks before coming back to you all in July. So you'll see this with numbers and staff hours and that sort of thing all assigned. We'll also be, so just a quick summary here of our next steps, we'll also be reconvening with the script members and hearing back from ARCO and SACO, because both those community organization boards had an opportunity to review these as well. So I expect they'll have questions and comments that we need to address. We'll continue coordinating over the summer with our technical advisory committee members and getting them on board and up to speed with where we're headed. And we'll turn our attention to the startup activities, all those things that I noted before of project web pages and that sort of thing, so that this fall we'll be ready to go and hit the ground running. That's the conclusion of what I wanted to cover with the PI plan, just walking through those parts.
Okay.
Questions.
So before we go to question and answers, I just want to suggest, just because we're time constrained, is Scrivener errors, suggestions about word choice, those kind of level of detail, please, let's refrain from bringing that up today. Bring it up with staff directly. Let's stick with kind of general content and suggestions. Commissioner Baker, and then
I'd let Commissioner
Randall.
start. So I started
Okay.
the last time.
Okay, thank you. I just had a short comment, Zach, and in the goals of the public involvement plan, there's a sentence that says, with limited resources and time, the neighborhood organizations have done an amazing job bringing residents together. And I just wanted to highlight that because I know I've had the opportunity to get to know a lot of the leaders, or several of the leaders at least, both in River Road and Santa Clara, and that is absolutely true. And so kudos to the neighborhoods and their leaders for that, because I think they have done a very good job of doing that, so that's a true statement.
Thank you. Commissioner Baker.
Yeah, just a couple of comments. This is really excellent, I think, really great if we have these on for all the projects in the future. One of the challenges, obviously, is there are multilingual groups living in this area, and this project provides a sort of an option to create sort of a template of how you would handle multiple languages on, in terms of having your documents readily available in multiple languages. So I just suggest that, and just any ideas or schemes. I mean, I thought of you might be able to involve some high school students to help. In other words, people are always looking for opportunities sometimes to help, but other groups that might help participate in, at least in this case, in this neighborhood plan, that would facilitate that process, because this would be a great process to carry forward, because maybe certain areas of the city might have a higher or a lower percentage of multilingual speakers, but it would be great to have a process where all of our documents were, made available in multiple languages, at least certainly key documents. So I just mentioned that. On page 5:30, coordination with other projects, I would also put down parks planning for River Road and Santa Clara, because I think there is some parks planning going on there. And you definitely want to have coordination with these other groups regarding that, certainly bus traffic and so forth. And then the last is sort of a general comment, and it's about page 37.3, make it happen, code and zoning. And I don't know exactly how to word this, but I'll just be blunt about it. I think it's important that we don't overreach either. In other words, we set a reason, don't push too far, and might be, it is a very, very challenging project. So I think if you don't push too far, sometimes it might be easier to be successful. And maybe there are some exceptions to that, but I just suggest that from all the parties, that there be sort of more of compromising, and it could be an extremely successful project in that way, in demonstrating that this complicated a project could be brought to fruition. Thank you.
Before I just want to add something is International High School, the Spanish immersion program is located, and they are required through the International High School program to actually do community service hours. So you can talk to the Career Center, and there's a possibility they could play a role. So Commissioner Nicolello and then Commissioner Borowski.
So I think one of the things that I absolutely loved about this public involvement plan is equity is not a footnote in it. Equity is at the forefront of it, which is fantastic. And there's a lot of really wonderful organizations already on here. I think just as a heads up, something the community may be interested in is there is a Mozilla Firefox grant available for this community, as we are one of their, I think it's called Gigabyte Communities, but correct me if I'm wrong. It's about $5,000 to $15,000 available for folks who are interested in seeing if they can incorporate technology into what they're doing. And for public participation, there's been a lot of exciting things with that. For example, people doing things with VR, virtual reality, people doing things with AI. There's actually already a few cities that have actually incorporated using VR into their land use planning processes. So I know it sounds kind of far-fetched, but it's actually already being done, and there is money available in this community to do it. And there are VR places in town, so you're supporting local folks. One of my questions for you, Zach, is, or perhaps even Julie, but what does consistent follow-up look like throughout this process? It's going to be an 18-month process, keeping in time, I believe, with the requirements of the grant. 18 months isn't very long in the planning world, but to those of folks who don't engage in that every day or frequently, what does follow-up look like to ensure that people are kind of aware of the decision-making processes as they come?
So at this point, we're very aware that everybody receives information in different ways. So a lot of it is web-based. We're going to replicate the constant contact newsletters that are distributed, similar to Envision Eugene, but probably with a unique branding element so people can see that. And we'll also be doing kind of regular newsletters that would go out to maybe at key points along the project that we would actually do direct mailings. That's been a request of folks in the neighborhood. So again, it's one of those tasks that we need to budget and scope and understand what the impacts are to our funds. But I definitely want to do that throughout the life of the project, as well as regular updates to kind of ARCO and SACO general memberships, River Road and Santa Clara Community Organization general memberships, so that we get all of these established networks and bodies acting as a conduit of information.
I think that's another thing that might be worth trying, that might be interesting too, is to see if maybe LTD would allow you to put flyers on the bus, on bus routes that go through that area. And then also too, I know my community did this when I was a kid. I'm not sure if this community does, but asking 4J if flyers can be sent home with people who have kids in school in K through 12. I believe that's something that some communities do. I don't know if ours does, but that might be a great way to reach out to people just on key parts where big decisions are happening. I think the only two more comments, if you'll bear with me. The other, and I believe that this is happening with the intercept surveys, but to look at models like Neighborhood Land and see what they do for kind of fun exercises in highly frequented areas. I'm sure that Zach and other folks have already looked at that, but what they'll do is put, for example, a giant board that people can write all of the things they want to see in their community, and they'll put it up by a supermarket or in a park or something like that. And it's kind of just a fun, easy way to get feedback from a lot of different people of all ages, and it's not quite as scary as engaging immediately, and also, too, kind of provides a nice way to kind of market and brand what you're doing. And then the final thing for the code amendments, I know that trying to envision text and trying to kind of think about how code actually looks in the real world can be a little bit difficult at times. So a way to maybe do a community engagement for that might be to invite community members through the River Road and Santa Clara listservs and things like that to submit their own design scenarios. And then see if the development team can actually meet some of those scenarios, because that way we're getting kind of a diversity of everybody's more generic ideas and maybe some more out there ones, and just to see that we can kind of get a wide approach of what people are doing. And that also might invite some folks who, for example, even developers and things like that, to submit some scenarios as well. I know that it's very much a neighborhood focused process, but it can be helpful to reach out to that demographic just to see how it may look from all of the wide range of different standpoints who may be involved. But otherwise, this is an awesome plan. I'm really excited to see this go forward. Great job.
Commissioner Borofsky.
Thanks. I just have a couple questions about the timeline and the staffing. I know that there was a grant that has time parameters attached to it, but all along we've also seen that this area's refinement plan and the university area's refinement plans were kind of contingent on the adoption of the UGB package. You know, that was always the thing: adopt the UGB, and then we'll free up staff time to do this. And I'm looking at some of these timelines, and I'm wondering if there is a hiccup in the UGB adoption, would that throw a monkey wrench into these timelines? Because we're putting this out there and kind of putting it out to these folks, but in the past it was always once that's adopted. So can you just talk to me about that? And I might have another question.
Turn that over
Yeah.
to Robin to address staffing.
It's kind of a what if. I mean, we can't predict
Right.
what's going to happen, but yeah, I mean, we're committed. Obviously, we're headed down the road on this project. If there was a hiccup in adoption of the UGB, it kind of depends on the nature of the hiccup. You know, if there's a big hiccup, we'd have to ask the question, well, okay, how would you like us to proceed with this? I think in general, what we're trying to do is be real clear about the set of work that we're doing, what our priorities are, and having that matched with the resources. So if there are changes in that happen as we're moving forward, we're just going to have to ask the question, which priorities are more important? And, you know, I think the approach I'd like to take is a yes and approach. Yes, we can do that. And would you like us to reprioritize something that we're currently working on? Would you like to add additional funds to allow us to do that concurrently? Or would you like to add that to the end of the queue and we get to that at some point?
Right.
So
okay. And the reason I brought that up is just so that the expectations are that we're going to get it done. And in this one, we've got a little bit more of a shoehorn because we have the FTA grant that says we have to get it done within 18 months. Yep. The other neighborhoods kind of understand, okay, once the UGB is enacted, but that means after appeals, and I think that there's a chance that somebody is going to at least try to appeal it, but how successful or how long that's going to take. And I just wanted to, if for God, some unknown reason, it blows up in the next, 2 weeks, or 3 weeks, that it could have an impact on this, and let the people know that that's the case.
Our intent now is to definitely proceed with this work unless someone tells us otherwise.
Perfect. That's all I wanted to know.
Commissioner Jaworski.
Yeah, just on the same question that Commissioner Borowski brought up. Can the transit one operate independently, or will it, if there something happened, can it still operate independently in an 18-month plus timeline? Or it just wouldn't be initiated and started? Or if it is started, I guess my question is being, do you still need to be the public participant? Is that all part of and mixed in with them? So if you can't start right away, they can't either? Is that what I'm hearing?
We've been trying to integrate the two projects so
Yeah.
they look seamless.
But that's what causes an issue.
If necessary, for some reason, some unknown reason,
Yeah.
we could pull them apart and go forward with just the corridor grant. In fact, that's why we pursued funding for the corridor grant in the first place, because we weren't sure of timing with the neighborhood plan. Now
Okay.
they've become
Okay.
concurrent, but I think we can go forward with the one without the other.
I'd say that would be real problematic, and we wouldn't recommend it.
Okay.
Are there any other questions, comments from Planning Commission at this time? So when will you be back? Just to kind of close it?
I'm going to say late July because
Okay.
the exact date might be contingent on what you
Yes.
do in the next agenda item.
Okay, great.
But as I said, we've got a couple loops back with internal staff and stakeholders, and we'll be meeting next week with the script members again. So you'll see some edits to both these documents based on this, as well as what we hear from the two boards.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much, Zach.
You're welcome.
So we're moving to agenda item number 4. It's the last agenda item, and it's Planning Commission operations. And Robin
Hey, great,
is the staff
thanks.
member.
I'd say for everyone's here, if you're real excited about this next agenda item, stick around. Otherwise, feel free to. Nobody will be insulted.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Okay. Next agenda item, I guess it is fairly self-explanatory. I'm trying to look it up here. Essentially, and I'll invite Bree in a second to provide some perspective on this one as well. As you know, we've had a busy few months, and we're just following up on a period of recruitment for the Planning Commission and all of our boards and commissions, of course. And one thing we've observed is you all know more than anyone how much work it is to be on the Planning Commission, and how the vast majority of our planning commissioners, I think, seated today and also in the past, have been folks that have a great deal of flexibility with their schedule. Either folks that are retired or at a point in their career where you've got a lot of control. Not everyone in the community obviously has that. And we do have an interest in providing equitable access to participate on our boards and commissions. And one of the things that has come up recently is part of the conversation about what can we do as an organization and as the most important working committees, commissions in the city, to make that more accessible to folks, and also to reduce burden a little bit on folks who are on the commission, and right size that. And so this whole agenda item is talking about our schedule and what other planning commissions in the state do, what makes sense for us and the workload that we have, what makes sense for our operations. And I'm sure you've probably already read this overall, but I'll just pluck out a couple of facts from the AIS here. In 2016, the Planning Commission met 25 times. That's including 6 public hearings and your retreat. And on average, it basically boils down to 1 Planning Commission meeting every other week, or 2 per month approximately. It's actually a little bit more than 2 per month. So by comparison, we met 22 times since the beginning of of this calendar year. So we've been extremely busy, basically meeting at about double the rate we normally do. And how sustainable is that? And overall, if you look at other Oregon communities, so there are two main areas where Eugene is different than most other communities in Oregon. One of them is the frequency of the meeting. Most other communities tend to meet twice a month. And the other is the timing of those meetings. Most other communities actually meet during the evening as well. And we've had a discussion about this at the staff level, what makes sense for us in terms of delivery of service and in terms of actually getting the work done. And have come up with a proposal for you guys to consider. And we invite you to consider that today. If you're ready, that's awesome. If you're not, we can continue talking about that. But I wanted to be as clear as possible about what that is. From a staff standpoint, it's obviously easier to meet during the middle of the day because it's part of the work schedule. We all have families and a lot of other evening meetings for other work to go to, so minimizing that is good. But the most important thing, as far as we're concerned, is making the work accessible to everyone and having equity in that. So changing a schedule from the staff perspective to twice a month, rather than, I think now we have 3 regularly scheduled meetings a month. Typically, I'm going to say we use the 4th one as well. We've tried not to meet on the first meetings of the month, but often that happens. And then often there's a public hearing or 2 scattered in there depending on what's going on in the land use world. So what we'd like to do is go to 2 meetings a month, and it would be the first, actually,
Second.
sorry, thank you.
Second.
Get my notes in front of me. Okay, schedule 2 regular meetings per month, the second Tuesdays of each month, and that would be an evening meeting. And then it would be the 4th Mondays of each month, and that would be the same time as we have scheduled here. So it's kind of a compromise. We have 1 day meeting, 1 evening meeting. Try to be regular about that. And if we have to for, I don't know, let's say we have legally required deadlines coming up for making land use decisions, we can always schedule additional meetings on the first Tuesdays or the 3rd Mondays. And we've checked with all the other boards and commission times and the use of this room, and that seems to work. The team is down with that, so we're putting it to you. And I just, Bree, if you have additional comments to make about this based on your experience, I'd invite you to do that.
Yeah, so this conversation actually came up because when staff and then a few of us were doing recruitment for boards and commissions this year, a lot of people went, oh my gosh, planning commission, that sounds so amazing. Wait, you meet every single week at 11:30, and so there was this interest in getting more involved or at least attending our meetings, but then once they learned about the meeting time, for a lot of people who may not be at that point in their career where they have that kind of work flexibility, or simply just can't take off work for whatever reason or miss that amount of time, it is something that's worth considering in terms of as we as a commission, we've tried very, very hard to be an equitable, transparent, and accountable commission. And so this is probably another dimension that we could perhaps consider. I can also speak personally as somebody who I calculated how much money I miss out on because I do planning commission, and I'm not complaining. I love what I do here. But just to kind of show, kind of that impact, I probably lose out on about $3,000 to $4,000, give or take, each year, which to somebody, to a lot of different folks doesn't seem like a lot, but to somebody my age, that's certainly a number of months of rent in there. And so something even as simple as moving 1 meeting to a nighttime meeting could be extremely helpful. And then there's also other folks who would, I think, would have an interest in applying if that time did change. Some things to also consider is, so I looked at the 25 largest cities in Oregon, which gets to under 1,000 pretty quickly. We're definitely one of the larger ones. But looked to see how often they met, and Portland is the only one who has they actually have an afternoon 12:30 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. meeting, but they have a hybrid schedule to try and accommodate different needs. And so that's the hybrid schedule that staff is proposing. And then the only other city that met 4 times a month is Beaverton, and they meet every Wednesday. But otherwise, most people stuck to about 1 or 2 times a month at night. Granted, Eugene is a larger city than a lot of those other ones, but just wanted to kind of explore and see what was, you know, the kind of average meeting time for a lot of our other peer cities. And so bringing this forward to you today, and wanted to provide that personal perspective, and also share just kind of some of the things that other folks have brought up in our recruitment processes.
I have Commissioner Baker, Mills, and Jaworski.
Well, I really want to congratulate Commissioner Niccolo and our planning director, because I really think it's good that someone thought about this and looked at it and studied it, because I think it is an issue that, you know, we look at ourselves here and we have the flexibility to come during the day, and a lot of people don't, because they have, you know, we have either, as Commissioner Nicolello said, either we have flexible hours or we're no longer working. In my case, it's always been because I had flexible hours and I could work evenings instead of during the daytime, but a lot of people don't have that luxury. So I really think this is excellent. So I would be strongly in favor of it. In fact, I would, looking at it, since we're the, and by the way, Salem is the second largest city, and we're third, and there was a couple of observations I noted when I read through this. One is that some of the groups meet for slightly longer than we do, or potentially meet for, I mean, obviously, I assume they probably adjourn earlier. So some of them meet for 2.5 hours at a time, or 3 hours at a time. And I think that would be one way of adding additional time when needed in some cases. But anyway, I'm strongly in favor of this. In fact, to be honest with you, I would be tempted to try to move all of the meetings to the evening, and except for overload meetings, try to have all the regular meetings in the evening, when not only can more people participate in the planning commission because they don't have the flexible work schedules we have, but people who might want to attend a meeting can do it without having to miss work. Now, we don't always have big crowds here, but sometimes we do, and that would allow those people to meet here without having to miss work. And we're trying to reach out to now multilingual, diverse communities, and I think that would allow us to have much more flexibility in that area. So, if anything, I would suggest, you know, we made a partway decision. We could go all the way. I know that might be a sacrifice for staff, but again, looking at everyone else in this state, I mean, we see the only jurisdiction that meets during the day is Portland. So, and you can understand where that might be the case too, because travel time in Portland is a challenge, and depending on where you work, and so it might very well be that that's part of their compromises to deal with travel issues. So, anyway, that's my point of view. Thank you,
Commissioner,
very much.
Commissioner Mills, thank you.
Yeah, I've got 3 or 4 points I'd like to make. Just first a couple of comments. In 2015 and 2016, through mid-June, we ran 7 meetings. This year we ran 22. So there's no doubt this has been an intense year. We've all experienced that. Those previous 2 years, we averaged 24 or 25 meetings per year, which is about where you want us, where we hope to be. You know, I have a question for staff to consider, and that is, you know, are we doing something different now? Is this this meeting frequency of once a week, is this a temporary condition, or is this seen as a step function? This is where we're going to be from here on out unless we do something. I tend to think, my opinion is, it's a temporary condition more or less, and we're going to get back to something closer to normal. We've had a lot of drains on our time here, and I think it's going to ramp back down. So I guess I wanted to say that because I'm a little discouraged to think that we've been telling planning commissioners, so you got to be ready to meet every week, because I think that's not what the real condition is going to be over time. So that's a comment that I have. And I'm going to let the others speak, and I'll come back.
Commissioner Jaworski.
Yeah, I have, on the accessibility issue, I'm very supportive of having an evening meeting. I see no problem with that at all. What I don't understand is the number of meetings. Now, I'm going to ask a question, because if you're suggesting this, then I want to know if I'm reading into. I know we've had a lot of work, TSP, this, that, parks, everything you can think of. Mm-hmm. So I guess what maybe Commissioner Mills was leading to, we're probably going to have some ramping down of that, hopefully. At least I think staff is seeing that, and why they're suggesting something like this. Mm-hmm. Okay. That being the case, I think one of the other issues besides those documents is, I shouldn't even say this, I don't know. It assumes we have more remands than what other cities have. But I'm not sure if that's the case, because we seem to be having an awful lot of meetings for those, and I'm not sure those are slowing down. So my question is this: when I look, very supportive of the evening meeting. When I look at your schedule, second and third and fourth at 11:30, if needed. Fourth preference, second and third in the evening if needed, and I guess the third is the preference. My issue is if you need more than 2 meetings in a month, you want to go to a third, do you go to the 11:30 or do you go to the evening first? And I think that should be known. I would prefer you go to the evening first on a Tuesday, so that if we have to have multiple meetings in a month, let's say 3, we have 2 evenings and 1 afternoon. I would not object to even them all in the evening, but I'm just saying that I just wanted to make that comment.
Yeah, thank you. That'd be real easy to clarify. And to respond to your first question, and also about the ramping up or down, is this the reality or not? The regular schedule is what the regular schedule is. This has just been a very crazy time, and we do anticipate ramping down. And there's another piece of this, which is the charter that you just saw that Zach is bringing forward. I think someone mentioned I'd love to see these for all the projects coming up, and in fact, that is actually where we're headed. So we need to get more organized and more efficient about the work that we do, and that means having a better idea of forecasting the timing of our meetings with the Planning Commission, with our other boards and commissions. So I think it's going to work out. Obviously, there's a lot of other parts of the organization that may want to come and talk to you, but I think we can fit that in.
My last comment on this is basically, sometimes it takes me 45 minutes to get here, and then walking around and this and that and trying to get back. And in the evening, it's not going to be any easier because that's the major traffic on Coburg. I don't know why, when we come here, we can't, all of a sudden, we got to go. I think we should have longer meetings, and if we're done earlier, we go. I think meetings should be more than 2 hours. Not saying we're always going to be more, but at least they are. Okay. The other comment is, you said this is a trial basis. I think we ought to be thinking of it once we go this way, we're committed. Because once you start making available to the people evening meetings and access, and then all of a sudden you're going to take it away from them, well, if it's only a trial, I think that if we're going to do this, we got to be thinking that this is the way it's going to be. Just a comment.
So I have myself in the queue, and then Commissioner Borofsky, Randall, and Mills. So I wanted to comment on what Commissioner Baker said, is that really my focus would be to make sure it's equitable. So by having an evening, you're eliminating a population. And I know we can't be perfect, but there are a lot of people with families, and evenings are really important, especially, single family or single parent, for instance. So I think just whatever, and I'm sure it's researched, and so I fully support this. I think if evenings capture the greatest population, then I'm open to evenings. That was just my point, is that let's make sure we're being thoughtful and intentional about what we choose. And maybe, I'm not sure there's a one answer necessarily. It's complicated, right? But so that's my main comment. I do like I support this. I think it's great. I do like the idea of, right now I have my calendar blocked out. If there's 2.5 hours, I think that's reasonable. And then if we don't need it, we don't use it. So just to maybe be proactive, I think that's what does that mean? So it would be 8 o'clock, so 5:30 to 8 o'clock, so that's reasonable. So those are the only comments I have. So Commissioner Borowski.
I understand where this is coming from, and I appreciate it. However, I'm a little concerned with the timing of it, considering the fact that council is scheduling to select a new planning commissioner this evening, and planning commissioners who have put in applications have looked at what the timing is and have applied accordingly to the timing. I was one of those commissioners, and when I put in my application, I put in my application considering that the meetings were Mondays, and I've put forth my schedule in that fashion. Not saying that if it wasn't, if this new schedule goes into effect, that would affect myself, but it may affect the new commissioner that may be being appointed this evening. So I have concerns about that. I also, this is a balancing act that's very hard to do. Commissioner Nicolello has issues with working, taking off time during the day. Well, there's other people in this commission that the main thrust of their work is in the evenings. And for somebody to take time off in the evenings is just as much of a burden for some of us as it is to take time off during the day. So to say that this is, it's a tough one for me. I can concur that I think that we'll get, there's good positions on both sides. That being said, I don't know that the hybrid gets to either one of those. I think what the hybrid does is it gets a little bit at each one of them, but it also takes away from each one of them. So I'm not sure I'm 100% on board with this.
Commissioner Randall.
Yeah. Now I'm trying to. Well, initially, I was thinking I liked the idea of one daytime, one evening, just because it does broaden the base potentially. Now I'm not sure it necessarily does, but I think it does at least give an opportunity for people who can't come during the day, even though it is over a lunch hour. To be able to come for an evening meeting. And so I like that aspect of it. I think it's worth a try. As we were talking, I was leaning toward even having them all in the evening, but I can see how that could be a challenge too. So right now I think I lean toward what is proposed with one during the day and one during the evening. I'm happy to extend that a little bit. I think I would prefer extending those a little bit and having fewer number of meetings. And I know from my personal schedule that would work much better. And from my personal schedule with our current workload, having an evening meeting would work much better than a daytime such as this. So that said, I think it would probably be best to wait a little bit, maybe, at least until the new planning commissioner comes on board, regardless of where things go with potential city council appointment. But with that new commissioner coming on to replace Commissioner Mills, I think it might be good to get their input as well.
Commissioner Mills.
Yeah, I agree. The new person should have a say in this. I'll go ahead and throw my 2 cents in. I'm kind of with Commissioner Borowski on the mixed bag kind of being even perhaps more restrictive than either one way or the other. In other words, if right now we're saying right now, the implication is you've either got to have flexibility in one way or another, whether it's through your employer, whether it's in your willingness to be able to make a financial sacrifice with your employer, which is, I hate to see that's required, and I'm very respectful of that, to come here during the day. In the evenings, I think it's going to be a similar case for some people who would like to come, but it'll require financial sacrifice for them. My gut is you're going to broaden the pool by going to evening meetings. If I had to guess, I'd say overall you'll find more people with less flexibility available in the evening, but you're going to find a whole bunch of them that you'll also rule out with that. So I recognize that. That's why the decision needs full consideration. I'm very supportive, and with that, I guess I wanted to add that my assumption in saying going to evening meetings, I'm hopeful that the staff and the planning staff has some flexibility in minimizing the impact to their family lives where possible in order to support those evening meetings. I know they're very dedicated. I'm not trying to think of 4 extra hours of work a day for them to do in addition, but so my gut is it's probably evening will get a greater pool. I also would be very supportive. I think it's a good idea to look at longer meetings in order to keep the number down. I think that's a very good thing, too.
Commissioner Baker.
Yeah, I think maybe a compromise would be to go with what was suggested. And one of the reasons is I think right now we do have evening meetings pretty regularly when we have hearings. And very often they're not planned ahead. They're planned ahead in that there's enough time that there's given notice. But if we were to schedule one meeting during the day and one meeting during the evening, we would for sure know when we could have public hearings, which generally are always in the evening. And that way, at least they would be planned out in advance. I think, would you say last year, I think there were 6 public hearings, which probably, I think almost all of them were during the evening. So that's half of the evening meetings we might have in a year. Again, it's unfortunate the timing when this is being proposed, and we could wait until the new commissioner is on board to make a final determination. But I think I have to agree with Commissioner Mills in that we would have the ability to increase the potential. I mean, it's going to be a challenge for people no matter what, whether it's day or evening, but in reality, more people can probably arrange a way to come in the evening than they come during the day. One of the problems is it takes time to get here from where you work. If you didn't work downtown and you weren't walking, it takes 15 minutes, even in Eugene, right, with no traffic. And then you've got to find a place to park, and then you have to leave. So you can't really come on your lunch break. It's not conducive to that because half of the time is your lunch break is spent just traveling back and forth. So I think that at least making a change that would allow for a good part of the time people know that there's a meeting in the evening. We can make certain that we try to schedule our public hearings always during that meeting evening, extending the time that we meet. Those are the things that I think.
So I have myself in the queue, and then Commissioner Borowski. And did you have something?
Yeah, I'd go ahead.
So after Commissioner Borowski is Commissioner Jaworski. So I think it's interesting. It might be interesting to find out why Portland does it. I agree with Commissioner Mills. I think splitting the difference is kind of a compromise. So at least it's once a month during one time and one time the next. I mean, like I said, I'm not sure there's the one single solution. What I do think I think because we have a new commissioner, I agree with that. We have a new commissioner with a set of expectations, just making sure that they're at least, we talk to them about this. I had one other comment, but I can't remember right now. So I will go to Commissioner Borowski and then Jaworski.
Taylor?
Yes.
If I can just respond to your question
Yes.
about Portland, because
Yep.
I did talk to their planner who's
Perfect.
in charge of that.
Yep.
So Portland's commission is a little bit different, and I made a note of this. They actually handle planning and sustainability, but they only handle legislative affairs. They don't handle quasi-judicial, so they are a little bit different than the scope of us. That being said, the thinking of having it one in the afternoon and one at night is exactly to accommodate those different kinds of people. So some of the feedback they heard from people was, I can only do nighttime meetings, other demographics could only make meetings during the day. They have kids at home at whatnot at night and things like that, or want to be able to spend time with their families. And so they have it during that hybrid. They're the only ones that do that hybrid schedule, and they do it specifically to try and meet the needs of as many demographics as possible. As they will say, and I asked their planner, they do tend to see more people at their nighttime meetings. So they tend to try and schedule their more, I don't want to say important, but their larger efforts that would be of interest to a wider scope of community members. They tend to schedule those at night.
Perfect.
So I hope that answers your
Yep,
question.
thank you. So I remember my third part, and it has to do with the public. So there's one reason, it's to accommodate, being able to have a more diverse planning commission. There's also staff time, but there's also the public. So considering that by splitting it, we have an opportunity to grab and have more participation on the public side. So thank you for bringing that up. Commissioner Borowski, Jaworski, and then Baker.
I'll pass.
Yeah, and I just want to give you a heads up. We've got 3 minutes, and I'm going to actually have us leave at 11:30. So keep your comments short. Commissioner, especially if you've spoken many times. Commissioner Jaworski.
Yeah, I already said what I'm in favor in, and I think most of us wouldn't mind staying longer. The issue I also would say, because of families, since say it's like 5:30 to 8 or whatever it is that maybe we've done it. We modify the agenda. We put some weak things up early so that in case someone's with a family and not going to get there, what does staff say, what do commissioners say, blah, blah, blah. We might have, and you do this already, Madam Chairman, you would have a public comment period, and an hour or two later, you might have another public comment period, and save the meat for the latter so that some of the people, if they do have families, I don't think they're going to eat at 8 o'clock, I don't know, but, that way they can do something and still go to a meeting if they have interest. It's just a comment.
Okay, Commissioner Baker, and can you keep it really short?
Yeah, no,
Commissioner
I am
Baker?
going to keep it
I'm going to
brief.
time it because I
Just-
want to make sure we get back to
Just a
staff.
quick observation. In general, we tend to, just so we don't think we're going to continue at the current pace, in general, we don't have as many meetings in July and August because people take vacations. That's just generally what we've had in the past. And also, the same thing happens in December. The latter half of the month, you generally don't have meetings, even though we often schedule tentative meetings. So we're probably not going to meet, like the calendar shows us, on December 25th, for example.
Or July 4th.
Or July 4th.
Does it show that? I don't know.
Yeah, or July 4th. So
I know you're all very dedicated.
So I just wanted to make that point. So just that we probably won't be, we will be ramping down because the winter is always, the winter and the fall are always the heaviest. The summer and December are usually light months for us.
So, Robin, now that we have said what we've said, it sounds like maybe there are a few of us anyways would like to make sure we pass this by the new planning commissioner. So what are your suggestions in terms of research you've done and what you've heard today?
Well, we want to do what works for you all. We're putting this out there to try to be more equitable. I think it's important for the Planning Commission to decide what your schedule is, and whether you do that today or whether you do that after a new Planning Commissioner is seated, I'm open either way.
Okay.
What do you want to do?
So let's take a straw poll vote. All those that want to wait for the new Planning Commissioner to start to make a decision. Okay.
I don't know why we can't do a decision and depending on the fact of asking them, can they make a night meeting? If they say no, we can come back and look at it. If they say yes, we're that far ahead.
Yeah, I mean, basically we got 1 minute. So, and we had we had 6 people out of the 7. So let's just, are they going to attend the next meeting?
Yeah, based on that, I think the first meeting for the new planning commission, I actually left my schedule in the office today, but the next meeting I think we have planned is for July at some point, later on in July. I mean, I'd have to double check. It's either that or August. Whatever the next meeting is that the new
June
commissioners.
26th.
June 26th?
Tentative. Yeah.
Tentative.
They won't be seated till
They won't be
July.
seated.
They won't be seated until after
Be
July.
the 10th, I have a tentative 10th of July.
Yeah.
Okay. So whatever the next meeting is, we'll revisit the topic and we'll debrief the person beforehand.
That's great.
Okay.
That would be helpful.
All right, perfect.
Yeah, because they don't necessarily need to be present, just debriefed. Yeah, okay. Perfect. Thank you. And have an awesome day.
Thanks, Jeff.
Jeff?
Jeff?